Welcome to the 5th session of the online Permagarden Foundations course, Biodiversity. In the last session, we discussed soil as the second building block of a permagarden. We looked at what makes soil healthy and discussed some techniques for building soil health. In this session, we will discuss biodiversity, the third building block of a permagarden. You will hear about the concept of biodiversity and explore how biodiversity can help permagardens and the households that have them function better. You will hear some key considerations to keep in mind when increasing biodiversity. And finally, you will review some techniques for increasing biodiversity in a permagarden and throughout the compound. Let's get started.
Biodiversity is the total number of different species found in one area. It includes all the different types of shrubs, herbs, vegetables, trees, animals, birds, insects, and even fungi and microorganisms that are found in a place. Since different species depend on one another to live, the more species there are, the better supported each individual species is when it comes to food, shelter, protection, and other necessities of life. Biodiversity is one of the Permagarden minimum standards. The Permagarden approach integrates plants, trees, and animals so that they work together to create a stronger, healthier, and more productive environment. By doing so, permagardens can produce more on the same amount of land and support the household with a wider range of services. Let's talk about how greater biodiversity can increase the productivity of a permagarden. Every species performs a function in the environment. For example, fungi aid in decomposition. Plants enrich and aerate soil with their roots and also protect loose topsoil from erosion. Animals such as chickens can consume pests from a garden and fertilize the soil with manure. Each new species, when carefully selected, that is added in and around a garden can create a healthier environment for plants to grow in. Species should be carefully considered to make sure it is the right species for that space. As species are added, the household can also benefit. Having useful species nearby, whether it be a preferred medicinal plant, a shade tree that cools the house, or a variety of vegetables to feed the family, allows a household to more easily meet their basic needs, so they are better equipped to deal with adverse events when they occur. We've seen that every species performs a function in the environment. Plants actually perform a whole range of functions that we can benefit from. Some of these functions help our garden perform better and others benefit us directly, such as providing us with food to eat. Take a moment to brainstorm with your group or list in your notebook the many functions performed by plants. We mentioned earlier that plants enrich and aerate soil with their roots and also protect loose topsoil from erosion. Some other common functions that plants perform in the garden are to keep soils cool and, as they decompose, return their nutrients to the soil. They can shade sensitive crops from the afternoon sun, protect crops from damaging winds, be used as mulching material, or provide food for the pollinators we need to grow crops. Some can be planted on the edges of fields to attract pests away from other crops or be used to make a pest repellent spray. Plants can also help us directly by providing us with something to eat or sell, fencing and building material, medicine, and livestock fodder. You may have thought of even more functions. Not every plant will perform every function, but many plants can perform multiple functions. For example, moringa trees can perform many functions. They can be a rich form of nutrition for the family, especially young children, a fodder for chickens and other livestock, habitat for birds, and a ready source of fertilizer if its leaves are cut and incorporated into the soil. We can then increase the functions a plant serves by intentionally planting it in a place where it is beneficial to us. If a household decides to plant a moringa tree on the western side of a garden plot, that tree then also provides shade for the garden. Although we have been talking about plants, animals also perform important functions, both for the permagarden and the household they belong to. They can cycle nutrients back into gardens, thus helping to build soil fertility. They can provide households with something to eat or sell throughout the year. And certain animals like chickens can provide alternative methods of controlling insect pests if they are allowed to enter gardens to consume insects off the leaves of mature crops. As is true with plants, animals can perform multiple functions and households can increase the benefits they receive from their plants and animals with some advanced thinking and planning about where to put what animals. This will be discussed more in session 7. When building biodiversity in a permagarden and throughout the compound, it is important to keep a few key considerations in mind. First of all, the biodiversity in a permagarden should contain many locally available species. Many households have come to rely on a small number of commonly grown crops, while the consumption of indigenous crops has declined. Incorporating a wider variety of indigenous crops into the compound can improve nutritional diversity, provide an opportunity for household members to cultivate culturally meaningful species that are valued for certain culinary or ceremonial characteristics, and open income opportunities through sales of indigenous foods. Secondly, increasing biodiversity can be done at a low cost to the household. How can we do this? For example, seeds and cuttings from useful species can be shared between households or sustainably sourced from wild areas and local vegetable markets. Non-hybrid seeds can also be saved from previous harvests and shared or exchanged with neighbors. Over time, these investments in biodiversity may result in new income opportunities for households as they diversify the number of crops, animal fodder, and building materials they can sell. It also provides an opportunity for households to save money if they don't need to purchase these inputs for their own households. A final consideration is that biodiversity can be built slowly over time if needed. Starting small and prioritizing species we know will help to successfully increase biodiversity in our compounds. Each season is a chance to add more species that can address any challenges you have observed in your garden or build on systems that are working well. As permagardens grow and establish, households can incorporate more species and experiment more with what they plant. Biodiversity can be meaningfully increased even by planting different varieties of a crop the household is already growing. Different varieties will mature at slightly different times, be adapted to different growing conditions, and have more or less disease resistance. All of these variations help households mitigate the risks associated with a changing climate and fluctuating markets. The Permagarden approach uses a variety of techniques to increase biodiversity. These techniques include intercropping or planting multiple species within the same garden bed. Intercropping is complemented by crop rotation, which is changing the type of crop that is grown in a given bed or plot season to season. The Permagarden approach also uses every available opportunity to create plant layers that utilize all available growing space and incorporate animals in and around the garden. In session 7, we will see how these techniques are paired with a planning process so that each species serves the household in multiple ways. We will now hear an overview of each of these techniques. Please see the supplemental materials for this session on the course webpage for more detail. Intercropping is the practice of growing 2 or more crops in the same space at the same time. Certain crops can be combined in a garden bed to take advantage of their different leaf or root structures and more fully utilize above ground and below ground space in a garden bed. Other crop combinations take advantage of the fact that some vegetables grow more quickly than others. They can be planted in between slower growing crops and harvested before these crops mature. When planting a permagarden, households are encouraged to think about the best way to utilize all available growing space, and this includes within the garden bed. Crop rotation, on the other hand, means making seasonal changes to the plants grown on the same piece of land. Rotating crops can break the cycle of pest infestations and reduce soil-borne diseases. It can also benefit soils by utilizing different amounts of nutrients from the various soil zones. If garden beds already contain a lot of biodiversity, there is less need to practice crop rotation. A typical crop rotation in a garden bed is leaf crop, followed next season by a fruit crop, followed by a root crop, and then a legume. The cycle starts over again with a leaf crop. For example, you might start with cabbage, followed by pumpkin, then potato, and finally bush beans. Beyond the garden beds, the Permagarden approach encourages the use of every available space to build biodiversity. Plants can be grown in the canopy or understory of a plot. Shrubs can occupy a different space than vegetables or herbs. Vines, root crops, or clamping plants like bamboo can all be used to strategically fill a garden space. Filling a garden space this way often involves incorporating trees and other perennial plants into the compound. These plants can provide some stability to households because they can be harvested for food or income during times when annual crops are unavailable. Trees and other perennials don't require much maintenance once established. Households can take advantage of the spaces over swales, on berms and half-moon berms, fence lines and walls, and other vertical surfaces to plant new species. Growing vertically can be a way for space-limited households to have more biodiverse production. As mentioned, animals also provide valuable functions for a garden and can be incorporated in a way that makes sense for the household. Thinking about new areas to put annual or perennial plants or animals is a good way for households to slowly build more biodiverse and productive areas into their compound. In this way, the Permagarden approach can be applied to a whole compound.
In conclusion, plants and animals perform a variety of functions that can benefit a household. The biodiversity in a permagarden should contain many locally available species. Biodiversity can be built at a low cost to the household through saved and collected seeds and cuttings from neighbors and wild areas. Households can build the biodiversity on their compounds season by season. The Permagarden approach builds biodiversity by intercropping, rotating crops, using every available opportunity to create plant layers that utilize all available growing spaces, and incorporating animals around the garden. Through consistent use of these techniques, households can increase the number of species available to them, allowing them to better meet their food and income needs. That completes the learning for Session 5, Biodiversity. Now, let's continue to Session 6, Developing and Maintaining a Permagarden, Step 1. Observe.